Hi friends, it's Corolla. On socials, I'm from Corolla. In today's video, I wanted to take a closer look at the ORI Infinitely Refillable Highlighter Set from Tom's Studio. So I'll take a closer look and I'll ink up the highlighters and then we'll do a pen testing or highlighter testing. So from the highlighter set, you can purchase 1, 2, or 3. And I went with the two highlighters set. And I also chose the color scheme. So right here I have the 2 highlighters that I went with, and I chose the green, the blue, and then the pink and the purple. And there's also the yellow and orange, but I decided that since I have a lot of yellow highlighters, I probably go with a little bit more of a colorful gradient. And so when you order the 2 highlighter set, you can choose which of the highlighters you want to include in them. And this is the package that you'll receive. And if you open it up, it's very well packaged, where you get the highlighters and also the corresponding ink colors. And these are fluorescent inks. They are highlighter inks, and so they will behave like what you expect a highlighter ink to behave like. And that's what we'll test. You also get a little cheat sheet or instruction, little pamphlet, just to kind of get you going. The other thing that they include in this set is a little package called Bits and Bobs, and I thought that's very, very cute, but also very useful. So make sure you don't get rid of this, because it includes silicone grip, which you can use to change out the tips on your highlighters. And then it also includes this little label sheet, and each of these circle labels can be swatched and then included, or you can add them to the cap of your ORI highlighter. And so on each side, you can swatch the ink that you're using in the ORI. And of course, you can stick to the corresponding colors, or if you kind of like to just have some fun, then you can use other fountain pen inks, or you can, switch it up. So use the pink highlighter and the purple end, and, by whatever you kind of want to use. So on the Tom Studio website, you can add in extra tips or different styles of tips. And so the highlighters that are included in the set come with a highlighter tip, and you can also get a bullet tip or a brush tip. And so it kind of just depends on how you want to use the ORI. I want to use them as highlighters, and so I kind of just stuck with the highlighter tip, and I'm happy with that. So I did want to show and compare the size of the Tom Studio ORI with the Tom Studio Lumos Pro Duo. So this is the Duo tip Lumos that you can get from Tom Studio. And you can tell, that the ORI is slightly shorter than the Lumos Pro. And it is also double capped. So on each end where you have a tip, you have a cap as well. So it's slightly different than the Lumos Pro, where you have, one tip that's capped and then the other tip that's nestled into the back of your first section. So that's how you can use the 2 sections. The other thing that I was kind of curious about is whether or not you can interchange the tips between the Lumos and the ORI. And it doesn't look like that, because the sizes are different in terms of where you would insert the tips. And then also just a general comparison is that this section is metal, whereas in the ORI it's plastic. And so it's just set up a little bit different, engineered a little bit different than the Lumos, even though it sort of follows the same guide of being able to refill each end, or, having 2 different colors and being able to sort of swap in and out tips as you like. So now what I wanted to do was ink up both of my highlighters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually ink them up with their corresponding colors, which of course you don't have to do, but for the purpose of this video and just for testing them out, I wanted to do that. So each of the ink bottles, they include this eyedropper, which is very handy because if you need to re-ink your tip, you can do so directly with the eyedropper. And also, you know, if you want to swatch the ink or something else, you can always use that eyedropper as well. So what you'll do is you'll just unscrew the top or unscrew the tip portion, and you'll see that there's a reservoir and also the tip. And so if you want to change out the ink or clean out the reservoir, all you have to do is pop it out, and you can flush this with water and rinse it out and let it completely dry before you re-ink it with a different ink color. And if you are using a fountain pen ink, remember to use a standard fountain pen ink because pigments and also shimmer might clog the reservoir, and then you won't be able to use the pen. So it will not flow through. And also, if you want to change out the tip to a bullet tip or a brush tip, all you have to do is use this handy silicone grip and just grip your tip and just pull it out. So I'm not going to do that because I'm not changing the tip, but that is something that you can play around with if you want to change it around. So this part is basically what you use to ink up. And so you put this into your ink and watch it, soak up this reservoir piece and start to move upwards. And so what you just kind of want to do is put it into each of the ink bottles. And so this one is the pink one, and this one's the purple one. So I'm going to do those two together. So we have purple. Let me just kind of put that into the ink bottle. And you'll start to see the ink start to soak up into the reservoir, and it will start to move up. And I usually sort of stop. I would kind of pull it out when it's close to the tip because you don't want to oversaturate anything. It will just be too wet, and it won't be easy to use. So it will continue to move up, and it will soak the tip. And if you want, you can put it back into the ink and continue to let it soak if you didn't capture enough of the ink. But I can see that it's moving up to the top. Oh. Okay, so this one is very saturated, which is fine. So what you're gonna do then is you're gonna screw both of them back in. So there goes one. And you might get a little bit of color on your finger, but that's okay. Okay, so they're both in there. And we'll put the cap on. And then for this time, I'll do it one at a time. So we'll do blue first. And so that will go in there. So it doesn't take too long. It's already moving into the tip now. And once it's sort of halfway to the top, I'll take it out. Now it continues to saturate to the tip. So this we can put right back in and screw it into place. So now that I've inked up each of the highlighters, what I'm going to do is just do a quick swatch on the label sticker and add that to the label. So there's the blue and the green. And then I have the pink and purple. So take each of the stickers and add them to the cap. So it's there. It's there. Pink and purple. So let's test the pink. Well, it's very bright and pink. And then we have the purple. Here's the green. Looks very neon and bright, and the blue. So those are the colors. So that's very cool. Very bright and neon. And I'm just testing in my Hemlock and Oak weekly and daily undated planner, which uses 70 GSM archivist paper. It's a white paper, it's fountain pen friendly, so that's why I wanted to test the ORI highlighters on this paper, especially with fountain pens and other sort of ink-based tools. Okay, so now what I wanted to do is basically test out some of my commonly used pens, pencils, and other sort of ink-based tools, and just see, you know, how they perform and how the ORI highlighters perform on top of some of most commonly used pens and pencils. So this is my ballpoint and the pen is Antique. Then we have a Zebra Sarasa clip, which is a gel pen. And it's 05 tip. And then we have a Jetstream. Multi-pen, and I just wanted to try the different colors as well. Because some of these colors, depending on what highlighter you're using, they may look a little bit different once you highlight on top of them. So just something to think about. And then I have a friction pen. And the friction is one of those pens that you can erase by using friction. So it has a tip that you can use to erase part of the word. Then I have a Tombow mono drawing pen. So I have to write, this one's a friction. And then this is a Tombow mono drawing pen 05. And then I also wanted to use the Tom Studio Lumos tip, because this is also a fine liner tip, but it uses fountain pen ink. So let's try that as well. And just gonna screw it in place. So that's the Tom Studio Lumos. Then we'll also use a pencil. So this is the Tombow Monograph mechanical pencil. Then I have a brush pen. So I love the Tombow Fudenosuke hard tip brush pen. Just great for hand lettering and for writing headers. Okay. Then we get into fountain pens, or fountain pen inks. This is the Platinum Preppy, and it is a beginner-friendly, but also very useful fountain pen to have on the go and to kind of use on the daily. But I used just standard black ink in here in a cartridge. And so what I wanted to test as well is pigment fountain pen ink. And it would be waterproof ink, whereas a standard fountain pen ink is not waterproof. And so in order to test that, I'm using my Sailor Hokuro dip pen. And the tip is a Fude tip. And so it's... it'll give me a little bit more of a line because the nib is upturned, and so it will pick up a little bit more ink. So I have some ink on here, and you can use a Fude tip for hand lettering as well, and that will give you those line variations, a little bit more line width as well. So this is a Sailor Hokuro Fude. Plus the ink is a pigment ink from Kakemori. So just pigment black. Put that there. And so we have quite a few pens and a pencil as well to test out. And if for some reason the highlighter or the ORI highlighter smears the ink, remember too that, you know, highlighters can smear over some pens. So it's not exclusive or specific to the Tom Studio ORI, right? Like highlighters do sometimes smear ink depending on what kind of ink you're using. And so that's just something to keep in mind generally. The other thing to keep in mind is if it does smear and you really do love using that specific pen or tool, then the other thing you can do is you can pre-highlight, right? So kind of how we did here with time blocking. If you pre-highlight and then write on top, once the highlighter ink dries, then you should be fine. So in terms of smearing, those are some things to consider. But you know, we'll do the test regardless and kind of see where we stand. So what I want to do is I want to use the pink on a few of the pens, and then we'll kind of jump to the purple and then the green and the blue. But what I want to do maybe is use a different color on the blue inks and the red ink so that we can kind of see the contrast. So let's try with the green first. And we'll do the green over the blues, and we'll see how that goes. So first up is the on top of the jet stream. Totally fine. We're talking ballpoint ink, so. And also on the friction. So that seems fine as well. No smearing. And if you wanted to, you could do a pink highlighter on top of red ballpoint pen, which you won't, it will sort of bring the intensity down of your reds. But of course, you can use a different color on top as well if you want it to stand out. So for example, let's try a contrasting color. We can do the blue maybe. And so again, that will bring down the intensity of the red. But no smearing, so that's nice. Okay, so let's do a few purples. So we have our ballpoint similar to Jetstream, totally fine. Then we have Sarasa clip. And we have the black Jetstream. So again, totally fine. So no problems with anything so far. Then we have the fine liners. Again, those should be okay too. Let's do blue on those. Oh, let's do blue on the two fine liners. So we have the Tombow Mono drawing pen and Tom Studio Lumos. So that one's very interesting because Tom Studio Lumos, I've inked up using a black fountain pen ink. And so you can see it's dragged the ink a little bit. And on the tip of the highlighter, you can see a little bit of the black transfer. A little bit, a tiny bit. So what you could do is you can kind of, yeah. So when I highlight on here, you can see how it drags that black ink a little bit. So that's on, that's a blue ink or the fluorescent ink from Tom Studio on top of a Tom Studio Lumos. So that's interesting. And then we'll do a few pinks. Here we have the Tombow Monograph mechanical pencil. So that's fine. It's fine. It's just sort of, it depends on the color that you're using. It might be a little bright on mechanical pencil. So let's see. I'm going to try again, but I'm going to use the green. So it could just be the color that you're using on top. It might be easier to see the pencil mark on top of the green or underneath the green, for example, instead of the pink. So that's something to consider as the color that you're putting on top. Okay, then we have the Tombow Fudenosuke or the Foodie, and maybe we'll use the green on top of that. And that drags the color as well. Just very slightly. And then we have the two fountain pen inks. So we have the standard black and the platinum preppy, and then we have a pigment ink using a dip pen. So what I want to do is I want to highlight on top, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to, instead of sort of taking my time highlighting, I'm just going to do it quickly. And that did not help at all because that dragged the ink color. So yeah, that's pretty noticeable when you're using it on top of standard ink, and then also on top of a pigment ink, which is meant to be waterproof. And maybe it's just a matter of letting it dry for longer. And that's definitely, you know, something that you can consider. So this is just my testing book. It's a Wonderland 222 notebook that uses Tomoe River paper. And so it's just something I use to test inks out sometimes. And so obviously I wrote this a long time ago, a while ago, a couple of months ago. And what we can do is just highlight on top of this because obviously it's been, you know, around a while. So that seems to be fine. So that seems to be fine on, and this one is Pilot Irishizuku ink. So this seems fine. So highlighting on top of fountain pen ink doesn't necessarily mean it's going to smear. And I wonder if it's the paper that I'm using here, the ink is just taking too long to dry. And so, you know, if I waited a little while, then maybe it's fine to highlight on top. Or, you know, if you're using Tomoe River paper or, you know, that related type of paper in your planner or your notebook, that could potentially have an impact as well. So my conclusion is it's not based on just fountain pen ink or the fountain pen. I think it's more based on the paper that you're using and how long it takes for the fountain pen ink to dry before you highlight on top with these fluorescent inks from Tom's Studio in the highlighter, in the ORI highlighter. So that's of course, if you're a fountain pen user like I am, then you know you always want to try and find highlighters and other stationary tools that you can use in conjunction with fountain pens, right? So it's kind of useful to know that, and something that you might want to consider if you do use fountain pen friendly paper. So I wanted to test the fountain pen ink again, and I'm going to test it on Tomoe River paper that I have, as well as MD paper. And I'm going to use my Esterbrook SD with a Techo nib that is inked up with Colorverse Windy City Blue. So it's a blue ink, and this should give me a good indication. Highlight on top. So this is a fountain pen friendly paper, as well as MD paper is also fountain pen friendly. It's a slightly thicker paper, and so I don't know if that will make a difference, but we'll give it a try. And I also want to retest the pigment ink with both papers as well. So again, I'm using a Sailor Hokoro dip pen with the Fude nib. So and it is the Kakamori pigment ink. Okay, so I'm going to give that a few minutes to dry, probably 5 minutes because of pigment ink. It does tend to dry or take a little bit longer to dry. But I hope that, you know, once it has ample time to dry, that it may not smear with highlighter ink on top, and it may still, and that's okay. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes or so, 5 or 10 minutes, I think. And I'm pretty sure everything has had ample time to dry, especially the pigment ink, which takes sometimes a little bit longer to dry. But let's try the green on top of Colorverse Windy City Blue, and let's kind of do that. And there's a little bit of a drag, just a bit, on the ink on Tomoe River paper, and then on Midori cream. Oops. Again, a very minimal amount, I would say. So it's actually not too bad. And I think I'm going to try the purple. And let's try up here. Yeah, so you can see, you know, it drags a little bit, but it depends on your tolerance of, you know, how much of that ink you want to see. And a little bit more actually on Midori cream paper. So, and so now I'm going to use the pink on top of pigment onto my river paper and on Midori or MG. So very minimal drag onto my river paper, a little bit more of a drag on MD paper. So that's somewhat noticeable. Okay, so let's try with the purple as well. So again, onto my river paper and on MD paper. Yeah, a little bit of a drag here. So if we're kind of comparing fountain pen ink versus pigment ink, I think pigment ink is better the longer you let it sit and the longer you let it dry. But I would probably say the same for fountain pen ink. You know, the longer you're able to let it sit and dry completely, depending on the paper that you're using, the better it is for when you highlight on top. So now that I've inked up and tested the Tom Studio ORI highlighters, here are my thoughts. I think they're awesome. I think they're very useful in that you have 2 tips or duo tips highlighters, especially if you like to sort of color code things in your notes. And also the fact that you can interchange those tips with a bullet tip or a brush tip, I think is very useful and very thoughtful on Tom's part to include that kind of customization ability. The ability to customize your tips and also the inks that you're using. So you don't necessarily need to use these specific inks. You can just use, you know, bright, vibrant fountain pen inks that you have, just making sure that they're standard inks and not pigment or shimmer inks. And I think they're very useful. I think there's also different use cases for it if you like time blocking, or like I said, you can highlight underneath something that you're going to write later, or, you know, sort of color code in that way. In terms of testing on top of commonly used pens and pencils, I think the ORI highlighters with the fluorescent inks behaved really, really well. I didn't find any problems until I sort of got down to using fountain pen inks. And I feel like personally it may have been the paper I'm using. It just takes a little longer to dry when you're using fountain pen ink. And so that's why I sort of tried it as well on Tomoe River paper, on fountain pen ink that I had written, a while back. So obviously the ink has dried. And in that case, the highlighter ink performed really well. There was no smearing whatsoever. So, those are some considerations to keep in mind. Maybe the type of fountain pen ink you're using that you're highlighting on top, as well as how long it's been able to dry, depending on the paper type that you use. But overall, I'm really, really happy with the ORI highlighter. I think in my personal case, I probably would use them on top of gel pen or ballpoint. Probably not so much on fountain pens anyways, especially if I'm kind of just note taking and I needed to perform really quickly. So those are all things to keep in mind, but overall really, really easy to refill and, reuse those reservoirs and those tips. And very, very handy to have. And I love the gradients as well. I love that, there are two colors that you can use, and you can fill them with whatever color you want to. So I hope that this was helpful for you to see. And, some things to keep in mind too, if you're considering getting the Tom Studio ORI highlighters. I do have a code with Tom Studio. So if you want to save a little bit on your order, feel free to use my code. Feel free to use my affiliate link as well, and support your creators that way. So thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you next time. I'm Carola on socials. I'm from Carola. Have a good one. Bye.